الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين وكان الله بكل شيء عليما بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين واستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح يا فتاح يا فتاح صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم الأمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given me and you the ability and tawfiq to participate in this gathering. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this gathering a source of guidance for all of us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this gathering one of the means of our entry into Jannah. We have started a new chapter in our Seerah series 2 weeks ago. In our first session we learned that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first worked for Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha's elder sister, because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a shepherd and Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha elder sister has a camel herd, and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was hired by Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha's sister to work for her. And when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam worked for Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha's elder sister, she told Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha that I have never seen a man who is more shy, who is more noble, who is more chastised in his interactions than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this impresses Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. It just so happened that in the same year, the caravans of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha was going to Syria, and she needed someone to take charge of her caravan. And so she decided, because Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so honest and he already worked for her elder sister, she decided to choose Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to take charge of her caravans, even though Prophet Muhammad was only 25 years old at that time. He was inexperienced and he was very, very young. But Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha decided to choose Prophet Muhammad because of his honesty. So she sent that offer to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, requesting him to take charge of her caravans who were going to Syria. And Prophet ﷺ, after consulting his uncle's name is Abu Talib, after consulting his uncle, Prophet ﷺ accepted her offer, and Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha agreed to give Prophet ﷺ 50% of all the profits. So Prophet ﷺ took the caravans to the Syria. That's what we learned in the last session. He took the caravans to the Syria, and Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha also sent one of her slaves along with Prophet Muhammad. Does anyone remember the name of that slave? Seerah. So Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha intentionally, purposely sent one of her slaves along with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came back, Seerah, her slave, told Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha about Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's honesty, character, his care, his concern. And when Prophet came back, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came back with ad'af prophets, yani multiple prophets, that Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha had never experienced before. He was so honest that when he came back with multiple prophets. Now this increases the emotions of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And like I mentioned in my last session, there is nothing wrong in saying that Khadija had an emotion for Rasulullah. There is nothing wrong in having that emotion, because she was a single lady. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an eligible bachelor, and she has this emotion for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not because of haram means, not because they were dating or not because they were doing something haram. She has that emotion for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First of all, why? Because she heard her sister praising Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam so highly, and then she herself firsthand saw the honesty of Rasulullah, the character of Rasulullah. And now when he comes back, Seerah is telling Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha about his honesty. So obviously this emotion came into the heart of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, so there is nothing wrong in that. Inshallah, in tonight's session, and I promise you I won't take more than 7 to 8 minutes inshallah. In tonight's session we will learn how this proposal, the marriage proposal, came about, because the ulamas have differed. But there is one thing that they all agreed upon, that it was Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha who instigated it, who hinted at it. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha somehow made arrangements for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to propose her. Because remember, in that society, in Jahili society, the way proposals happen is that a man is proposing a woman. That's how it used to happen back in that day. But even if a woman shows her interest or expresses her interest, in that society, With certain conditions, still it was permissible. But at the end of the day, it was actually a man proposing a woman. A woman can show her interest with certain condition, and it is something that is permissible in Islam, by the way. Allah tells us in Quran, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُمْ, you should marry who you want to. So if a woman shows her interest in Islam with a certain guidelines, totally permissible in Islam. And it's important for me to highlight this issue because our daughters, our sisters, when they come up, especially in the Western societies, when they come to us and they tell us that they are interested in someone, and this guy is, mashallah, he's a noble guy, he's a Muslim guy, and she met her in the university in a pure halal way, in a pure permissible way, and now she shows her interest in that person. Sometimes we Desi parents, we get very emotional, and we think that this is un-Islamic, but in Islam it is totally permissible, with certain guidelines obviously, with certain guidelines, it's totally permissible for a woman to show her interest. So Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, according to one version of the narration, she spoke to one of her friends. And according to the other version, which is more authentic version, she spoke to one of her slaves, who was an elderly lady. She was an elderly lady, and her name was Nafisa. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha told Nafisa that I am interested in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Nafisa said, leave it up to me. I will go and ask Muhammad. You don't worry about it. So she went to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the way, Prophet Muhammad was not sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was not a prophet at that time. And that lady was an elderly lady. So she came to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she said, oh Muhammad, why don't you get married? You're 25 years old, why don't you get married? And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started smiling. He said, who would want to marry me? I'm an orphan and I'm a poor person from Quraysh. I don't have anything in my possession. I'm a poor guy. Who would want to marry me? So Nafisa said, what if Khadija wants to marry you? What if Khadija wants to marry you? And Prophet was quiet and he was shocked. So Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was the most known. I told you in my first session, there were many people who were pursuing Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, who wanted to marry Khadija. He was quiet and he was shocked. And he said, why would Khadija want to marry me? Now remember, understand this. He never said, I'm not interested in Khadija. He's just shocked and he's wondering, why would Khadija want to marry me? So the message is given now, that I am interested, but why she wants to marry me? He is interested. And remember that lady, elderly lady, when she came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she never said that Khadija sent me to you. She just said, what if my master or if my friend wants to marry you? What do you think? So she gave this general kind of proposal. And Prophet said, why would she want to marry me? So it means that I'm interested, but why would she want to marry me? So Nafisa came back and she told Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha that Prophet is interested, but he's shocked. He's interested, but he's shocked. And then the matter came into the second stage. Now there are two versions of this story. And this is something that we need to understand. There are two versions of this story. And by the way, just as a side note, let me tell you that this marriage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, it took place in the month of Safar. Why am I saying this? And why am I highlighting this? Kisi ko pata? The first month is Muharram. We don't arrange our weddings in the month of Muharram because we believe that Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu was martyred in that month. So out of respect for him, we don't arrange the wedding ceremonies in the month of Muharram. But we also don't arrange any kind of functions and any kind of wedding ceremonies in the month of Safar, which is the next month. And the reason why we don't do it is because there is a chaliswa of Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The 40 days of the martyrdom of Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu completes in the month of Safar. It is a pure bid'ah and innovation. Prophet's marriage took place in the month of Safar. And I'm not saying this, Ibn Ishaq rahmatullah alayh, who is one of the first people who wrote the biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's saying this. He said their wedding took place after 3 months of his journey. When he came back from Busra, when he came back from Sham, then his marriage. After 3 months, 3 months after his return, the marriage took place. And the marriage took place in the month of Safar. Now there are two versions of this story. This is the last thing and then I finish inshallah. I have never mentioned, by the way, the second version of that story in the Seerah classes that I have ever taught before. I taught Seerah classes in Pakistan, but I have never mentioned this story. But there are some people who are mentioning the second version of the story. And if you go into YouTube, there are many people, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us, but there are many people who do propaganda on the basis of that version of that story. So that's why I feel compelled to tell you that version of the story in order to let you know that this is not an authentic version of that story. The version of that story is, which is mentioned in just one book of Seerah with a very weak chain, is that Khadija's radiallahu ta'ala anha's father was alive at that time. And he opposed that marriage. Her father was alive and he opposed that marriage. So he was caused to become drunk, so that it can made appear to him, or so that he would be convinced that their marriage has already taken place. He was caused to become drunk in order to convince him that the marriage has already taken place between Muhammad and Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And when he became sober, it was too late for him to say no. And there are other details of this story that I don't want to go into. This is not something that is a very nice story. But what I want to say that this story, we find it contradicted by many other facts. First and foremost, I told you this before, in a Jahili society, a woman would never inherit wealth. Never ever. Just in the case of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, it was a special case. Her husband died, she got some part of the wealth. Why? Because her husband did not have any children, did not have any siblings, did not have any parents. And also understand this, a woman in that society would never ever inherit if her father is alive, if her son is alive, if her siblings are alive. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha inherited that wealth because her siblings and her father were not alive at that time. Do you understand this? Ulama have agreed. Ibn Hajar rahmatullah alayh, many other ulama pointed out that the father of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha had died before that marriage took place. If he was alive at that time, he would have all the wealth of Khadija. But because Khadija had all the wealth, it actually proved that Khadija's father was not alive at that time. Do you understand this? Additionally, there is another version of the story which is more authentic version, which is mentioned in many books of Seerah. And by the way, here I have to pause and here I have to point out, there are many books of Seerah written in the first 100 or 200 years after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many of these books are without the chains of narrations. These are just stories that these people have collected, just some story, and these people don't know who narrated that story. So there is a possibility that there might be a story that might have happened to someone else, but the narrator got confused and he thought it happened to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because at the end of the day, all of these things are just stories and legends that have been passed down. So it's very important for people like me, for people like you who come and participate in these kinds of gatherings, that we look at these stories, sift through them, and try to understand which are the authentic stories and which are not the authentic stories. So anyways, the authentic version of the story is that Khadija's uncle, Amr bin Asad, he was alive at that time and he became the wali of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. There was no alcohol, there was no issue of being drunk, of being sober. This is a story that is not true with the father of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, because he was not alive at that time. And I have just proven it to you that why he was not alive at that time. Her uncle Amr bin Asad became the wali. Prophet ﷺ came with his uncle. What was his uncle's name? Abu Talib. Abu Talib came and he stood up and he gave a sermon. And he gave a sermon, and that sermon is recorded in the books of Seerah. It says that he stood up, started praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he started talking about his own lineage. You know, that's what we do nowadays, especially in our Desi community. Whenever we go to a girl's house, we start talking about our son, and we start praising him, and we start telling them that how good we are and how respectful our family is. So he stood up, after praising Allah, he started praising his own lineage, and he started saying that we are the descendant of Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, and Allah has blessed us with this and that. And one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we take care of the Kaaba, and we live in Makkah, so we are good people, we are respectful people. And he said, this young man, my nephew, in all of the Makkah, there is no one who is as noble as him, who is as good as him, who has as good lineage as he has. There is no one who can compare my nephew, who can be compared with my nephew. And then he said that my nephew has proposed your Al-Karima, your noble lady, your noble daughter, with the mahar, again a very important point, with the mahar of 12 uqiyya. With the mahar of 12 uqiyya. Uqiyya is a nugget. It's a nugget. So 12 uqiyah means 12 nuggets of silver, which was a modest amount. Modest amount. I don't want to give you a precise figure, but approximately in our time it would be some £100. So it's not a huge massive amount, but at the same time it's not just a token figure of 10-20 pounds. For a person like Prophet Muhammad, who was a shepherd, who lived on a minimal wage, who used to get the minimal wage, who had the least paid job, for him 400 pounds, 500 pounds in that time was a very respectful mahar. And by the way, no offense to any one of you, most of the time we fix mahar on the nikah ceremony. I have to remind people to fix mahar. On the wedding ceremony, on that day, we fix mahar. Mahar should be fixed when the proposal goes. When you give a proposal with the mahar that this is what we can give it to your daughter. But because we live with Hindus so much that we don't think about mahar, we only think about jahez. We only think about dowry. That's what we think about. But this is the way of Islam, that when you go with the proposal, you go with the proposal with the mahar. And you give a good mahar. It was a very respectful mahar for Rasulullah sallallahu. I went to every nikah I went to, no one ever fixed a mahar more than 500 pounds. I'm sitting in the house of Allah and I'm lying. And I've done many nikah. They have never fixed more than 500 pound mahar. Never ever fixed. And they fixed it right on the spot. When the girl's side cannot say anything. They can't. What would they say to you? No, we don't agree with your mahar. They would tell, okay, we are going back then. We're taking our barat back. What would you say to them now? Right? But this is an Islamic way. You go with the proposal and you tell them the mahar. If they agreed, then alhamdulillah, that proposal is fixed. So he came, Abu Talib came, gave that sermon, tell them the amount of mahar, and then afterwards the uncle of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, Amr bin Asad, he stood up and he said, this young man, no one can refuse his proposal. No one can refuse. So we accept your proposal. And that's how their marriage took place. Now Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha had already been married twice before that. And she didn't have any children from the second marriage, but she had a child, she had a son from the first marriage. His name was Hala. Now commonly in our times, Hala is a girl's name, but in that time, back in that day, it was more like a boy's name. It has become a girl's name in our time, but don't get confused. Hala was a boy's name in that day, and Hala was a male, and he was a son of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. He eventually accepted Islam, and he lived a very noble life with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One issue that we really need to discuss, but don't worry, we will discuss it in the next session. People are already falling asleep, so inshallah we will discuss it in the next session. The thing that we will discuss in the next session is that how old was Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha when she got married? How old was she? 40. This is a common perception, but we need to look into it. Because remember, after they got married, they had 6 children. Yeah. Together they had 6 children. How old was she? This is something that we need to look into. Inshallah, we will look into it in our next session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant understanding. I will keep them small, really small, 10-12 minutes, that's it. I won't go past 10-12 minutes so that I can keep you interested in that session. So hopefully, inshallah, we can maintain this consistency. We can keep coming, inshallah, we can keep taking part in it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant understanding.